My guest today is someone that I've been wanting to talk to for quite a while, but for whatever reasons, we just never got it done. And then recently, I saw him in a video that where he was talking to a graduating class and sharing his passion for the industry. And I said, you know what, I've got to get this guy on. So let me introduce and welcome someone that probably needs no introduction, Paul Danner, otherwise known as ScannerDanner to his YouTube fans. Paul, thanks for coming out and hanging with me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me. And just real quick, my name is not Dan.
Yeah. So we get that from like other people who see your YouTube handle and think your first name is
All the time. All the time. It's kind of funny, but sometimes it's, yeah. I'm just tired of talking about it. But you get new people all the time, and I guess they thought that I thought of a catchy phrase to go with my name, Dan. I don't know. Scanner, Danner.
Yeah.
I just put "ner" at the end of my name to rhyme with scanner. No, that's not what I did. My name is Paul.
Right. And I thought, actually in that video, that's a good lead into. You had an interesting story about how you got that handle. So why don't we start with that? How did you get that handle?
Well, my students for years called me that, but there was one, I'm trying to remember her name too, and I don't remember the girl's name, but just the one day in class, she's like, ScannerDanner, she was just said that name, and this is probably around the same time, maybe just before I decided to start putting videos on YouTube, and when I created a handle or a YouTube name, that was the first thing that popped in my head, and because it was recently that this girl in my class called me ScannerDanner, and I was like, that's a great name. That's what I'm going to go with. So that's what it's been. It was from one of my students, and I apologize to her. If I knew her name, I'd say it, but
yeah, well, maybe she'll see this or one of yours, and she'll pop in there and remind you of who it was.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I know we're friends on Facebook, but I have like 3,700 friends on my personal Facebook page, and she's one of them. And for me to even find that wouldn't really even happen. So
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I know I'd seen your videos in the past. I think we actually met at a Vision conference, and it's been a few years ago. I think that we met there.
Was it Vision, or was it that CAN conference in Chicago that we met? Were you at that CAN conference in Chicago?
Oh, that might have been.
I think it was. I thought it was. Yep. I remember sitting at the bar with you and having a beer and talking about stuff.
Yeah. But I guess really what I wanted to bring you on today for was I saw some snippets of what you were sharing, in that video with those students, and you have quite a passion, for the industry. That shows in your growth, it shows in your teaching, and I think that's one of the unique things about your channel, is that you are, and still are, working tech. You're still getting your hands dirty, and you had a passion for sharing that knowledge with the technicians of tomorrow. So let's start with that. Let's just, in a brief summary, what got you in this industry and has led you to the point where you are now?
Well, I sort of fell into the industry, Pete. I took auto mechanics in high school only because I hated high school and I didn't like the books, and I just needed to be out of the classroom. And I ended up signing up for tech school in high school in 11th grade. My older brother, who a lot of my community knows as James, we all call him Danner, but he I think he started carpentry and I started auto mechanics. So he did carpentry in high school. I did auto mechanics. And I mean, honestly, we didn't learn a whole lot, mainly because I wasn't prepared to learn a whole lot. I just was more interested in, partying and, hanging out with my friends more than anything. And, life was pretty rough as a kid, and I just had no direction at all. And then my brother ended up, when he graduated, he's 14 months older than me. He graduated and he went to Rosedale Technical College, it's called now. It used to be an institute, but it is now a technical college. He went to Rosedale Tech ahead of me, and I just remember him learning more in 2 months at that school than I learned in 2 years in high school in the tech school. But again, I'm not faulting our our tech program. It was definitely more my fault. And, those instructors were still very instrumental in my career. I had the one instructor in high school got me my first job at a 10-minute oil change place right up the road. And so, I was able to do a co-op in 12th grade, which was awesome, Pete, because that was even less time I had to worry about being in school. And I got to work. So I'd go in high school half the day, and then I'd work, the other half of the day for 4 days a week. And then I'd only go to tech school 1 day a week, so that was in part why I didn't learn a whole lot too. But it was awesome. It was perfect for me. And, I zero direction still, Pete, in life. And I just ended up following my older brother to Rosedale Tech because, that's where he was. And, coming from a family of low income, we didn't have any money at all. And we had full grants to go. So we qualified because of our low income and our status, and 4 kids, no father, and single mother, and we qualified for grants to go, and so I took advantage of that and followed my brother there, and I wouldn't say I had a passion for anything, in not only in this field but just in general, until I got to electrical class at school. And my instructor, his name was Dan Svitko, and he was just amazing, fascinating to me. And the subject of electricity was like, I don't know, it's just like somebody flipped a switch in my brain. I think I mentioned this in that video you were talking about, that my first test, I got a D on my first test in electrical class, and then he said something real derogatory toward me, and I thought to myself, he challenged me. It wasn't a bad thing, and I thought to myself, I'm not dumb. I'm not that, and I'm going to prove it to you that I'm not. And it was a combination of his comment and then just my love for electricity that I aced every single test after that, Pete. Every single one. I went from a D to like A plus, A plus, A plus, A, like all of the tests. And all I did, and I never learned how to study either, but all I did, or previously, I never learned how to study, but all I did was, paid attention every day in class, asked a crap ton of questions, wrote all kinds of notes, and then I would just review those throughout the week, the notes at home, and I was able to ace every test. And there's this long-haired, pot-smoking, kid who has never really done good at anything that's all of a sudden doing better than the smart guys in the class. Yep. And, that's where it started. It really started from there.
Yeah. And all it takes is that one motivational teacher. I think that all of us can go back in our past and pick out that one. For me, it was a 7th grade math teacher.
That's neat.
That kind of lit a fire, and we're blessed if we've had one of those in our life. Sounds like you were. And of course, now that started you at the tech school, and then from there you went on to working as a technician, right? Or
That's
back
correct.
in those days, we were still mechanics.
Yeah, we were still mechanics. I still call myself a mechanic. I used to get hung up on that technician mechanic name, and you know what? I'm proud to be a mechanic. That's what I am. I'm a tech. I'm a mechanic. Whatever you want to call me. It's just a name. Doesn't matter. But yeah, no, it was. So from school, I was hired at a garage. It was called Auto Perfection, and they're in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, so not far from my home. I grew up in South Park, and so neighboring community, so real close to home. And Rosedale Tech got me through the job placement program with this brand new garage. It was a brand new facility. It was just built. They had no technicians, and they had just opened. And so I went for the interview with my hair halfway down my back, and they didn't care. They didn't. And in the past, I've had people want me to get my hair cut, and I was never going to cut my hair. You know what I mean? And that goes back further. We can talk about why I wouldn't cut my hair, but another time. Or later in this if you want to, if we have time. But so when I started there, again, no other technicians. There was a 20-year Mercedes-Benz tech, was the one owner, and then a mechanical electrical engineer was the other owner. So these two guys were lifelong buddies and partners, and those were my two bosses, and I was the only tech. And Pete, people ask me all the time, how can I get good in this field? How can I advance in the diagnostic part of this field? Because that's what I do. And I was given the perfect scenario because being the only tech, these two guys wanted to pour in everything they knew into me. And every car that came in the door, because it was a brand new shop and we were slow, guess who got to touch it? Me. And so it was just the perfect situation. I didn't get paid crap in comparison. At the time it was okay. It was like, I think I was making $6 an hour in 92 changing oil. And then I went, in 93 when I graduated Rosedale to $8.10 an hour. So it was a $2.10 an hour raise. So to me at the time, that was great. But it wasn't even about the money. It was just being in a shop environment that was hourly, and I was never rushed. I didn't realize it at the time, how much that part was pouring into my foundation of learning and doing things properly and troubleshooting correctly and asking myself why. And when I would go to my boss, his name was Joe Moydell. When I would go to him, the one engineer boss, when I'd go to him and tell him what this car needed, he would always ask me why. I used to hate it. I used to hate it because I didn't have an answer. It was kind of like, well, I think, this crank sensor's bad. I have no spark on this, GM 3100 engine, for example. That was probably the common one around then, that, in the early 90s 3100 engine. I remember specifically not really knowing a good test that would say crank sensor or module. I knew it was one of the two, and I just remember writing up a repair order and handing it to him. And he's like, well, why? And I'm like, well, and then I realized at that time the limitations of my voltmeter. I'm like, I don't know. I'm seeing a signal here, but I didn't have a lab scope, and I couldn't really tell, was that a good signal? And then I bought a Vantage, the old school Vantage MT2400. That tool changed my life, Pete. You can attest to that. Maybe that first little, it's not really a lab scope, but having scoping capabilities in my hand that I can now not guess, and I can see a waveform. And that was pretty early years were critical, man. They were critical. I try to tell people how to duplicate that today in today's fast-paced world, and money and flat rate and all this stuff. And how do you get good at that? And my short answer is always get yourself in a shop where you're touching everything now. And get into a place where the boss allows you time to go through that. And don't worry about initially if the money isn't there right now. It's not going to be. This is a trade that you have to, exercise the muscles first. You have to have that memory in your mind too, and problems that you see and mistakes that you've made, and understand why, and be given the time to evaluate that. Then you start to really build this foundation, and the speed and the money will come.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think that's a really good point you're raising here, and I want to make sure that any of the shop owners in our audience who are watching this are paying very close attention. All the talk now is about the technician shortage. It's a problem that's been going on almost for as long as I've been in the business, but it's kind of reaching a head now. And now it's just a huge issue because we really haven't done anything to address it over the last few decades.
Yeah.
And we've got some young talent. First, we've got to attract that young talent into programs like you had at Rosedale, and keep them in the industry, because every technical oriented business in the country is looking for the exact same talent, that we are.
Yeah.
And I typically see, and maybe you can comment on this, that the two biggest mistakes that some old school shop owners are making when they bring in new technicians, freshly graduated technicians, is that they either treat them like I was treated. You're the shop gopher while you're learning, and you're dumping trash and cleaning out bathrooms between oil changes, or they're expecting them to be an A-Tech right off the bat because they have this 2-year degree.
Right.
And neither one is the case. And guys, if you're watching, listen to what Paul is saying. You've got to mentor these new techs. You've got to give them a chance to practice what they've learned. And in all honesty, and again, you probably comment on this, if you're in a 2-year program, by the time you get to the field, there's so much that you have lost because you're not using it. You almost have to
Yes,
relearn a lot of that.
absolutely.
And so you're also putting these techs under pressure to not just do the diagnostic work, but the routine stuff, the brake work, the oil changes, the battery services, all that other stuff that comes into play in the shop. So, again, shop owners, if you're paying attention, you've got to mentor these people. These young techs come in, whatever age they might be, the new
Yeah.
techs, I should say, that are coming in, and help them grow in those skill sets and have some patience with them, as they develop that. And for the folks who are students and are watching, I think that there's a lot of opportunity in our industry, especially now going forward. There's so much new technology being developed and so quickly that for someone
Hang
who
on, Pete. I
doesn't,
lost audio here for some reason. You there?
yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. My fault.
No
Sorry.
worries.
Yep.
Hey, everybody, that's just a part. That's just doing a live interview. That's the way
Yeah.
it goes.
You're,
No,
just
it's,
back up your last sentence for me, and I don't know if you were asking me a question or not, or can I jump in
I
now?
just, I was
I
just
had a thought.
making, I was just making a comment that even for the people who are considering this as an industry, you know, there are shops who are just like Paul is describing that want to mentor you, want to develop you as a tech. If you're in a shop now and they're not treating you right, they're not doing you right. Hey, if you live in any kind of a metropolitan area, there are more than other opportunities that you should pursue. Don't let that hang you up. Don't let that discourage you from this business, because it can be a very rewarding business, and it's a very stable, right? The country's got to keep moving regardless of what's going on in the economy. So it's one of those jobs, like my dad taught me, if you can work with your hands, you'll never go hungry, you'll never go without work. And that, I know that's done that for me over the
Yep,
years.
that's absolutely true. And to talk on the two paths you mentioned, one is to give the guy time, and the other is the guys that are changing oil and, like you said, cleaning the bathroom between oil changes. I've heard guys tell me, I've been doing this for 6 months, and now the next 6 months are going to move me to the alignment machine, and then this 6 months after that, they're going to no. You need to leave that garage right now. That's
Yeah.
not where if you want to do this kind of work, if you want to do troubleshooting, diagnostic work, electrical, you need to be in a shop right now that you can start touching it. And not a year from now, not 2 years from now, right now. And then the other thing that you'd mentioned that is important is it takes time. When we come out of tech school, these tech schools that teach you that you take our program, that you're going to make six figures when you leave here. That's just not the way it works.
Right.
When you leave tech school, you have this brain. I always picture it like your head is spaghetti, right? Everything, it's up there somewhere, but all the paths cross and they're all touching each other, and you have no, like, picture that spaghetti brain as like no diagnostic direction, no flow, no straight lines, no lefts and rights. Everything's all intersected and connecting. You have
Right.
no idea. You have no idea how to connect the dots yet. All you have is this foundation of knowledge that, in my opinion, you can get nowhere else. You spent that time in those lectures, in those classes. You were diligent. You applied yourself. That's great. That's step one. Step two, you need to start combing through that spaghetti and making some straight lines. So how do you do that? The only way to do that, Pete, is you make a bad call on that car, and you got your ass kicked by that car, and you understand why you got your ass kicked by that car. And then all of a sudden, that one noodle that was intertwined with all those other ones is now a straight line. And when you walk that line, you remember exactly every single step that you did, because you got burned on it. And that's what it takes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's what it takes. And the only difference, I've said this a lot, between us and doctors, and what we have is we just don't kill people when we make a mistake. So, we can't. No, you're right. Yes, we can if we do something dumb with brakes and tires. But I'm saying, like, if I make a mistake, I might kill that module, but that module is not someone's heart. And so, we get the advantage of hands-on learning, and that's, unfortunately, it's at others' expense, whether it be the garage owner, whether it be the technician or the shop owner. When you make a mistake, somebody's paying for it. But that's just the way the field is. And you need to be able to be given the opportunity to make mistakes. You know, and of course, put somebody over top of that young tech. You know, put a guy that has patience and can walk through that diagnostic process that new guy just went through, and make sure he's making the right call. If it's a $2,000 module, you might want to have the senior tech back up what the junior guy did, just to be sure. And if garages would think along those lines and would develop these young kids, it'll pay off 100-fold.
Right.
And everybody's just all about the dollar right now, Pete. Unfortunately, that's what it is. Everybody wants the dollar now. Pay me now, pay me now, pay me now. And they don't even think about what's going on in the future. You know, I would have never thought everything that I did early on, all the way through, all the pain, all the struggles, all the low income, including taking a $10,000 pay cut to go teach originally from the industry. I didn't know it was setting me up for what I'm doing now. I had no idea. You don't know what's on the other side of that door in this field. This field is exciting because of that. Every door you walk through, there's like 3 more doors that open that are available after that one. That's the way this field is. It's for people to knock it so much, I understand. There's a lot of bad things, but there's a lot of good. You just got to navigate through it and find it.
Right. You got to have that drive. And you were fortunate, again, as you pointed out, when you first started and you were putting your hands on these cars, you had mentors that were asking you that why.
Yeah.
Why. And
right off the bat, Pete.
Right.
Right off the bat.
And the shop owners, you need to understand that. I mean, yeah, sure, let this guy get his hands dirty. Let him try to figure it out, or her figure it out. There's some very talented lady technicians out there.
Absolutely.
And then if you need to verify it, like you said, don't pull the trigger on a $1,000 computer, until you help the kid make sure that that's what it is. But that's how you grow those checks. And then, of course, as you commented, I mean, and I saw in the video, we'll kind of jump through that. As your career developed, you became more adept at the diagnostic end, to the point where that was all you were doing in the shop, right?
Yeah, no, and I didn't create that till much later. So I was in that independent garage for 3 years. And hey, hon, just real quick before you walk by the camera, this is live, and there's okay, don't go that way. All right, gotcha. And tell the kids to turn that TV down a little bit, if you could, please. If only I had an office, right? I do have an office. It's upstairs. I'm in the dining room.
It's all right.
Sorry, hon. No, but so as far as making the diagnostic part, the only thing I did, that wasn't till 8 years later, Pete. I mean, I had 8 years in the field first, doing everything. You have to be, there's a misconception that you can come out of school too, and I have my students say that too, is like, I want to do what you do. Well, I put 8 years in full time in the field like every other technician, and I had to do everything, you name it. Brake, suspension, transmission, interior, pulling dashes apart, air conditioning, you name it. I did everything for 8 years before I went back to my alma mater, Rosedale Tech, as an instructor. They hired me to teach my favorite class, engine performance. And within there, I started, when I took that pay cut from industry, because I was doing well, and I did, by the way, when I worked for Pep Boys, which is my second shop, I was there for about 5 years. I did make myself the go-to guy for diagnostics. So I would come into work, and I think that was in my speech. I'd come into work on a slow day, and there'd be 3 diagnostic jobs and 2 AC jobs. There's 5 repair orders under my name, and there's not a car in the shop. And the reason for that was because I was fixing them. Of course, there was favoritism, but the favoritism centralized around who's the guy that's fixing the car the first time, and as a service writer or service manager, so I don't have to make that second phone call, which is, well, we changed this part and that didn't work, so now we need to change this part. It basically is what that second phone call is. Nobody wants to make that second phone call. Right. And so the guys that are fixing them are going to be the guys that get that kind of work. But it wasn't, Pete, until after, and I created my mobile diagnostic business and my teaching, that then I exclusively, just from that point on, which was September of 2000 to today, has really been exclusively electrical and drivability. And sometimes I do a brake job now, Pete, I really screw it up. Like, I really am way out of practice. Like, I just did my 2012 Navigator brakes on my wife's, and it has 2, I didn't notice the little cutout on the inboard pad. they looked identical. Other than that, I put 2 inboard pads on one side and 2 outboard pads on the other, and I warped, and the brake pad got lodged in the caliper when it wore down, and I warped the rotor. So there's me in mechanical repairs now. So nice job, Danner. You did a great job on your wife's car.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the way it is really with this field everywhere. If you're not touching it, you're losing something, you know?
Yeah. That's again something that we tend to focus on in our channels, is a lot of that everyday stuff where the technologies have changed, where you can't treat it the way you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You know, there's just that much nuances to them nowadays. So that's a good lesson to learn. Okay, so I got involved with the teaching. Of course, you're doing that at Rosedale, learning from the mobile side. So then what germed the idea of putting this stuff out there on YouTube?
That's a great question. So, as I said, I started in 2000 teaching, and then from 2000 to 2010, I was just working on my own material. What I felt like, what I was seeing every day when I'd go out and do my mobile diagnostic calls, what I'd see every day, I felt what was the important part for my students. And we ran a live shop too at Rosedale. So, you know, we got live cars coming in, and so it was just a long time of me kind of writing different, I used to call them sections. I think the book is still titled Section 1 and Section 2 because I never worried about chapters. It was never really written in a way that was like, okay, follow chapter 1 to chapter 2 to chapter 3 and follow in that order. So I never chose the word chapter, but that was just what it was. And for 10 years, I put together material that I felt like was key, was foundational, was fundamental, stuff that every technician needs. And then I put that, you know, as part of my class. And then I started, you know, distributing that to those guys. At first we were using the printer at the school, and by the time they're done my class, I'm printing out 400 pages per student, you know, and before I ended up, you know, making a book out of it and doing it that way. But in 2010, I was like, well, I got all these case studies. I have all this material. This is great. The guys are getting it. And then I heard about this YouTube thing. And, you know, I think I mentioned in that video that you saw, Pete, that the only thing I knew about YouTube was, you know, Charlie Bit Me and you know, Double Rainbow Guy, you know, and so I only knew the platform was free and that all these young kids are watching this now. And I'm like, man, I'm going to take a camera with me and I can put some of these case studies on YouTube so my students can see it. I had zero idea of being a YouTuber. That wasn't even a name. I had zero idea of monetizing it. I didn't even know what monetizing was. I looked up the definition of monetize. What's a monetized video? Oh, it's commercial revenue. I didn't even do that for the first year. I had 20 videos up, and I was just letting my students know, hey, check this out. You know, we're in chapter 1 in my book, and we're talking about misfire diagnostics, and I got a shorted primary waveform I'm looking at, and I have a shorted secondary waveform I'm looking at, and I have that on paper. And then I have the opportunity, Pete, where I'm in the field now with the camera. I'm like, check this out, guys. Here's a shorted primary. Here's a shorted secondary. This is what it looks like. Here's your symptoms. Here's what we went through to get to that point. And then I just picked up the camera and went. And so, you know, from day one, it has been about my students. And then, you know, and when I filmed, I always wanted to do it live. I didn't want to stage it. I wanted the students to hear a thought process. Let's just turn the camera on. Here's what's going on in my screwed up little mind. And, you know, some people don't like that style and some people do. And you don't have to like it. That's just what I'm doing. And I still do it that way today. I don't stage it. I just turn the camera on and let's see where this takes me. And sometimes I look really foolish, but that's okay too, because those foolish moments are just as teachable as the other ones. And you understand why I went that direction momentarily is because I ignored this one piece. And how important was it in hindsight that one piece I ignored that steered me the wrong way? How important was that piece? That might be worth more than the entire video. And so that's been my mentality, but that's what it really started with. And then all of a sudden, you know, after a year or so, I get people from all over the world that are like, hey, you keep mentioning this book, and you know, what where do I get this book? And it was like light bulb, you know, it was like, whoa, I guess I should make this a book and I should start selling it. And so that's really where, you know, ScannerDanner began, was just trying to make my class better, Pete. That was it.
Well, and I got to say that, Paul, from I kind of felt that was what was behind your efforts in the beginning, and you're like that teacher that you had when you were coming up to your students. You know, if you have a passion, how can I help these men and women learn better? And again, like you pointed out, you know, classroom is one thing, a diagram is one thing, but to physically see it, if you can't put them over your shoulder, then put them over your shoulder with your camera. And I applaud you for that. It's kind of one of the reasons that G and I partnered to do the webinars the way that we do them, because back in those days, it was a talking head.
Yeah.
And in the background, you know. So we would try to do everything we could as much as possible in the shop. Same reason, you know, for the technicians in the field. I don't know. You probably can comment on this as well. But when I started almost 10 years ago with the magazine, it was kind of just being in the right place at the right time. You know, I was a tech for many years, made a living, you know, didn't have any issues. And I got involved with doing some articles for the magazine. We won't go into all that because this is about you.
That's fine.
But when I did get to the magazine full time, I took the Words Motor Age training, which is one of our brands, seriously. I said, you know, right now all it is the ASE study guides, but we have a brand, Motor Age Training, and I've always been of the opinion, and you've been to some of these training events around the country. They're great. Not going to be in the least. You know, there's nothing better than getting together with a bunch of like-minded individuals, learning from some experts in the field, and then networking with each other, sharing war stories and all afterward. You can't beat that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, there's a lot of men and women in our business who just can't afford to do that.
Right.
And that's you know, like goes back to the auto mechanica program that we did the first time in Chicago, and I won't go back through all that, but my whole reason for going this route is to just express the same feeling that you have. Whatever I try to do, whether it's the webinar or the print features or the stuff that I put up on the channel, it's all about giving the men and women who are trying to make a living in this business access to resources that they need and want.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess that's probably the thing that I've shared this with everybody from OEMs down to, you know, aftermarket CEOs and techs and over a beer. You know, there's 750,000 men and women in our industry trying to make a living as a technician. That doesn't include any of the other job facets.
Is that just the U.S., Pete, that number?
Yeah, that's the U.S., right?
Okay.
The U.S., okay. And from what I've seen at training events, I'm sure what you've seen, I'm going to say that maybe 15, 20% are in that top tier. You know, the really good diag professionals who can be thrown a problem and can handle that. And then on the bottom side, there's probably, I'm going to be optimistic here and say 15%, you know, that I wouldn't allow them to change the plug in my lawnmower, you know, let alone fix my car, right?
Yeah.
But there's that majority in the middle are men and women who know they can be better, want to be better, just lack the resources.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
stuff like you're doing, the stuff that we're trying to do, as you've seen, start off benefiting your students in your physical classroom,
Yeah.
and now benefiting students around the world.
Yeah.
And my hat's off to you.
Thanks,
because
Pete.
it sounds from what you're telling me, and I'm sure anybody who's met and talked to you probably feel the same way. The passion for helping them grow is more than the passion for earning the paycheck. You're putting that first, and that's one of the things that I've shared many times too, and it's kind of biblical. And I know that you have some pretty strong foundational beliefs yourself.
Yeah.
But if you do things for the right reason, all the rest of it takes care of itself.
For sure.
And of course where you are now has been your blessing for what you've given back in return.
Thanks, Pete. And you know, I'd be lying to say that, you know, my income level now is far surpasses anything I've made in the field. So it is about me too, but it did start, as you said, it wasn't about anything other than just trying to help other people. And that's really where it began. And And that is something that this world is missing today, I think, is that perspective, where I want to help my fellow man first, before I help myself. And everybody has a help myself attitude nowadays. And if we could only all have a help others attitude first, in this nation as a whole right now, imagine what we could do. Imagine what we could do, Pete.
Yeah, I'll probably screw this up. I know it goes something like, "He who would be first must first be last," or something to that effect. I'd have to look that up. But,
yeah,
it's in there somewhere.
For sure.
Well, Paul, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out and sharing your road to the automotive industry.
Glad to be here, Pete. Appreciate
it. And hey, well, those who are watching, if you haven't seen ScannerDanner on YouTube, then by all means, search him out. It won't be hard to find. And if you want to find out more about his book, I'm sure that you can access that through his website, which is
www.scannerdanner.com.
Yeah, that's easy enough. And then, of course, some friends of ours at AES Wave also have the book for you. So it's not hard to find. So if you want to develop your skills quickly, maybe the shop you're in is not as fortunate as what Danner had. He's got it in the book and with his videos, and I guess he has some premium material as well.
Yes, sir.
You can sit down and take a class with him.
Yes, sir.
By all means, take advantage of his resources. It will help you in the end do what we've always tried to do here at Motor Age: advance the automotive service professional, help you make a better living for your family. So, Paul, thanks again.
Thank you, Pete.